Hey guys, this is Yana from Watercolor Painting Academy, and I wanted to share with you a pretty curious insight that I've got recently. I was talking to a friend. We were discussing new ideas, launching new businesses, how these things happen, and how people don't really bring their idea to the end, or opposite, they keep working on the same project for very long time, even though logically speaking, you should have quit it some time ago. And I give an example of it's very important to quit the project or whatever you're working on time, instead of keep pushing it for endless period of time when it's not efficient and not going to bring you any good results. And I give an example of watercolor, saying, in watercolor, it's also very important to know when to stop, because it's so easy to overdo things and add more and more details and new layers and everything. So in watercolor, it's very important to stop at some point. And then I realized that, well, actually, there's so many things that are like in watercolor, at least in my life. So that's what I wanted to talk to you about today. So I wanted to share with you 4 ways how watercolor changed my life. Well, it's not going to be a heartbreaking story how watercolor saved me or anything, but more practical things that happens in my life, or how practicing watercolor actually affected me and still affects me in my daily basis life, daily choices. So first example, you need to know when to stop. In watercolor, it's very easy to just lose yourself in painting the same piece for hours and hours and hours, and just adding more and more details, and thinking that after this tiny stroke and dot is going to be better. And the truth is that more often than not, it is better to actually stop and just leave your artwork the way it is, without overloading it with way too many details and layers and tones and mid-tones and whatnot. And especially for beginner artists, it's pretty difficult to feel this moment. It's a very thin line that often is very easy to push and overstep. So a lot of beginners, they actually think that adding more is going to bring the watercolor painting to its best, state. Which is most of the time false idea, because it is better to leave something unsaid. It's better to leave something light, especially with watercolor, it being a very light and transparent and airy medium. It is better to leave the work slightly undone, like slightly unfinished in your eyes as an artist, so that the viewer can fantasize and add whatever is missing by themselves. So how it manifests in my life. I remember before I started working as an artist full-time, I was doing a lot of different projects, and I was working mostly in marketing. And at some point I got interested in Amazon business, and so much interested that I actually launched a business on Amazon, which was related to art. I completely developed a product from scratch, and I designed it. I found a factory. I produced it with the factory together, controlled the whole thing, and released it on Amazon, and was responsible basically for everything on my own. And I was pushing it for a few years, and it was very interesting experience, definitely worth trying. But then I realized that it is not really bringing me the results that I wanted, especially emotionally. Doing e-commerce turned out to be not something that was interesting for me. I was more on the side of creation, teaching, inspiring at some point, but not really doing marketing work and looking for ways for promotion and new products to launch and like all the technical parts that it required to do. I wasn't really excited about this, but I was still pushing myself because I thought that at some point it's gonna, bring me some satisfaction. And it was very important to know when to stop. And I think this habit of like stepping back and evaluating the picture when it's half done or almost done, as I do when I paint with watercolor, is very important to do when you work on any other project. And in my case, back in the day, I took a moment to step back and look at what I'm doing, how I'm doing it, how I feel about it. And I decided that at this point, it's better to stop. And I sold the business. And I was very happy about that. The second thing that I do with watercolor and that helped me in life as well is to think. It might sound funny and obvious, but in watercolor, before I start any painting, no matter how big or small it is, I always sit down, look at my reference, and I look at the empty piece of paper and I just think. I think about color palette, proportions, composition, what is going to be where, how I'm going to start it, how long it's going to take me, what proportions of each color would I need? Do I need to prepare it ahead of time and stuff like that? So I really just think and stare at the reference photo for a while to mentally prepare myself for this process and for this project to happen. And I noticed that in my daily life, I also actually quite often take the time to just think and plan out things before I start doing them. So, for example, you know that I publish watercolor courses, and I do that for a few years now. So when I have an idea for a new online course, I think, wow, that's awesome. This flower, this lily is amazing. So how about I make a course about it? So instead of just jumping in and starting recording the class right away, I take a second, longer than that, obviously, but I take some time to sit down and just think. I'm not even necessarily like writing anything or doing anything specific. Just think with a cup of coffee how I'm going to approach it. So I think that, okay, first I need a proper reference photo that's going to be not too difficult for beginners, for example, if my target audience is beginner artists. So it's exciting to work on. Then I choose the reference photo. Then I'm thinking, what should I do next? Okay, I need to line out the whole structure of the class, to do the outline of the class, what I need for each step. And if any step would need some extra preparations, for example, I need to print a photo and I need to go to like a shop to do this, or I need to prepare some extra materials. What if I don't have them? So I need to go and buy them. So when the day of actual recording comes, everything is there in front of me. I'm ready, I'm prepared, and I just need to sit down and record the class. Because if I don't do all this thinking and visualizing how this is going to look like, most probably I will end up just forgetting things and having to stop my recording process and go look for stuff that I need, for example. And, a lot of possible situations can happen that are out of my control because I didn't think about it ahead of time. And eventually it's going to make my video recording process much, much longer than it could be. The third way how watercolor affects my life is happy accidents. So if you're painting with watercolor, you probably know that one way or another, you always have a situation that is out of your control. You paint something, you reach out for water or new paint, and accidentally your brush drops some pigment on, I don't know, yellow pigment on the blue sky, and then game over. You can't continue working on this painting. Or something like this happens quite often with watercolor. It's very unpredictable. It has its personality and way of behaving on its own. And I know this, and I already accepted the fact that these things happen. And what I need to do is not to be upset and throw the paper away and, be mad or whatever. What I need to do is to find a way to work around this accident so it becomes a happy accident. And when I was teaching live workshops in Chiang Mai, in Thailand, students were often complaining that they would accidentally take a wrong pigment or accidentally drop pigment in the place where it shouldn't be, or the paint leaked too much into the place where it shouldn't be. And they would be discouraged because, the paper is ruined, you need to start over. And what if you're halfway to the end or almost in the end of your painting? It's just upsetting. So I always try to encourage them to think creatively and find a way how you can use this accident, this thing, to actually benefit you. And most of the time, there is a solution. Like, if you know your pigments well, you know that some of them are stainy and some of them are not. So if the pigment that you drop accidentally was not stainy, you can quickly lift it with the tissue, or you can use a brush and just, clean it up and with the wet brush with water and lift the pigment. And most of the time, it's gone completely. Or you can add another thing that will cover this mistake, paint over it, and many, many other different solutions. What you need to do is to try to think not in a way that you're copying a photo, like a photo reference, but in a way what you can do to change the situation to your own benefit. And nobody knows that this splash was not supposed to be there, right? So if you creatively mask it, nobody will ever know that you made a mistake. So an example of my life, in November 2021, Leslie and I were supposed to go back to travel. And we spent a year in Kiev, Ukraine, and we're planning to restart our post-COVID adventures and go back to traveling in Asia and maybe South America. So things didn't happen this way, unfortunately. We had to cancel our plans, and this was very upsetting, very upsetting. I can't even begin to explain for how many reasons. Traveling for both of us is our lifestyle. We are not used to spending more than 3 months in one city, not to say 2 years in one country. So for us, it was very difficult to accept this. But the way I want to see it is like in watercolor. Instead of being upset about the situation, you need to find a way to make the situation work for you. So I sat down and I decided to find good things about being here. Even though it's winter, it's very cold, it's gray, and I don't have my friends who are currently in Thailand or Mexico or somewhere else. But there are other things that are good and that are not available, for example, in Thailand or Mexico or somewhere else. So I made a list of things that I could enjoy doing here and I can't find when I travel, so I should benefit them right now. And even though this is a very obvious thing to do, and you probably are thinking, duh, but when you're emotional, when you have to cancel your plans, when you don't really want to be where you are, you're not really thinking clearly. And this habit of trying to work around your own mistakes or accidents or unexpected things that happen, like in the painting, applying it in life is actually pretty helpful. So now I'm trying to diversify my daily life with cool things that are available in Kiev, but not available abroad. And it's pretty good. And the final thing, how watercolor affects my life, is start lightly. So watercolor is a very special medium, and the pigments are pretty transparent, most of them. Some of them are opaque, but most of the time watercolor is very transparent. And when you work on whatever painting, one of the main rules, if you can apply rules to art, one of the main rules in watercolor is to start from the lightest tone or lightest color and build up to the darkest one. Of course, there are artists that have their own style and start from darkest and go backwards and whatever. It's a preference of that particular person. But in general, traditionally, watercolor works from light to dark. So usually you start painting and you evaluate the picture and you decide, okay, so the lightest tone is this, or color, and I'll start from this, and then I will add darker tone and darker tone and darker tone, and slowly, tone by tone, layer by layer, you build up depth and realistic feeling of the painting. So in my life, how I actually use it without knowing it is every time when I have to work on a big project that requires lots of steps and it's a bit frightening and you procrastinate and you don't want to start doing it, so you kind of find ways to push it away and do something else. I use this approach of starting lightly. So for example, if I need to write a very big blog post, very long post, which requires recording video and creating piece of artwork, and explaining a lot of things and editing and lots of steps. What I like to do is I like to break down this big task into lots of small little steps, light steps, easy steps. And I'll start with the one that seems to be the easiest for me, the lightest one. So it can be something in the middle. I can literally start writing this blog post from the middle. Like, I don't know, I feel the most exciting part about this is how I mix colors using color wheel, for example. So this is the part I'm starting from, even though it's going to be in my blog post somewhere deep in the middle. But to me, it feels the most exciting and the most easiest to do right now at this moment. So I start from it, I write it down, and then step by step, I will build up other paragraphs or other parts of this blog post to eventually write this massive 5 pages blog post that need to be done. And this way, it doesn't look scary, it looks logical and achievable. So I really think that this starting lightly as in breaking down into steps and working on small, easy steps, one after another, is a very useful approach in watercolor and in life. And actually, I do have a heartbreaking story for you. A long time ago, before I started traveling, I was working in a PR agency. And my life was focused on building a career, working in PR and marketing, digital marketing at that time. And everything was revolving around it. Then at some point I realized that I'm doing something wrong with my life and it's not fulfilling for me. So I left to travel. And since then I have been traveling for more than 6 years nonstop, never really staying long in one country. This was the time when I decided to work on my art as something more serious than just a hobby. And this is the time when I started to spend more time on learning new techniques and mastering my existing skills and taking master classes from artists that I admired. maybe going deeper into fine art and the theoretical part, so that later I could have more confidence to paint artworks for sale and organize art events that later on turned into hosting my own workshops, and later on into creating online courses, and eventually launching the Watercolor Painting Academy. And now looking back, I can see that this whole time watercolor was with me, and now watercolor is something that's given me the opportunity to live the life that I always wanted, and the life I love living. It allows me to travel the world and do something that I love, which I already said like 5 times. So you got it. I love it. And yeah, so I think watercolor indeed changed my life. So thank you for watching. I hope sharing this curious insight of mine was interesting for you. And if you have any comments, please do share them in under this video in the comment section. And see you in the next video.